Hey everybody, we are going to go over something I call the biological roller coaster. It's a diagram and it's an explanation on how to understand the timing of contractions and how that leads into the breastfeeding relationship. Now, I made this up, so feel free to just use it as your own. Use this to explain to your families that you're working with. If you're a doula or a childbirth educator, a midwife, a nurse, it really doesn't matter. This explanation can be really useful in whatever form that you or whatever role you fulfill in birthing families' lives. So first of all, when we think of contractions, we usually think of them as kind of like like how they come out on the monitor at the hospital, right? So peak, pause, X contraction peaks, and then a pause. So when we are counting these contractions, this is the roller coaster, by the way. Okay. So when we're counting contractions, we always want to count from start to start. So many times the wording gets confused. When we're considering the frequency, that's why I use the F there. When we're considering the frequency, a lot of times you might hear someone say, oh, the contractions were 5 minutes apart. And when you say that, a lot of times it sounds like what you mean is this part. But when we're talking about timing contractions and finding out what the frequency is or how far apart they are, we're really talking about that from start to start, the start of one to the start of the next. That, like I said, is your frequency. Now, the next thing you're going to keep track is from start to finish of one contraction. That's your duration. Okay, so you've got from start to start, that's your frequency. From start to finish of one contraction is your duration. How often are they happening? How long are they lasting? Okay. Now, the last thing that you're going to be keeping track of is your predictability pattern. And let me explain what that means. Most of the time, when a birthing person is getting ready to go into the hospital or they're learning about the childbirth process, their biggest concern is, when do I go? You know, when do I go to the birth center? When do I go to the hospital? When do I call my midwife? When do I, what signals that labor is here and it's the big day, right? Because we can have a lot of early labor that starts and stops and starts and stops over the course of even weeks before the big day. You can even start to dilate before the big day, but that big day, right? That's the word I usually typically explain to my families. The big day is when labor starts and it doesn't stop till that baby comes out. Okay, so that's the big day. Granted, it could be 2 or 3 days long for that process, but the big day is when labor is in full swing and we're not going anywhere until this baby comes out. So when we're looking at that, these families are told to do or follow the 511. Now, the 511 stands for minutes apart, lasting for 1 minute. And then the predictability pattern means it's been going on for an hour. This predictability pattern is happening without necessarily without deviation, but pretty much consistently and predictably for 1 hour. Now, the other thing to know is that this isn't an average. Really important for your families to know that, because some of the apps that they might be using on their phone will average this frequency. And so you might have contractions that are like 3 minutes, 12 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 minutes, 12 minutes. Like it might be bouncing all over the page, but then when you average them, it might look like they're 6 or 7 minutes apart. However, that bouncing around, that non-predictable pattern, that's not what we're talking about. Okay, we don't count the frequency of the contractions as 5 minutes apart for one, and lasting for 1 minute and predictably for 1 hour until you get to that point where it's truly like 5 minutes and 1 second, 4 minutes and 59 seconds, 5 minutes and 2 seconds, 5 minutes. And you can kind of say, okay, well, it's been 5 minutes and there should be oh, here it comes. So when you have the predictability pattern for an hour consistently, for at least an hour, that's what that's about. Okay, so frequency, duration, predictability, pattern. I hope that you understand that. Now, the next thing that I would ask my clients to kind of keep track of is, if they have a doula, right? You might go from 5 minutes doing the 511 actually down to like 411, right? Because if you have someone in the home and they're supporting you, you might feel more comfortable staying a little bit longer, especially if you're trying to go all natural. The longer that you are in your own space, feeling comfortable and safe, the better and more productive your labor contractions will be, the more effective they will be. Now, if you are right around the corner from the hospital and you're trying to go natural and you have a doula with you, you can push it to 3, the 311. That might be a little much, but if it's a first baby and everything else is looking good and you can get to the hospital really quickly, then 311 might be a reasonable predictability pattern to look for. Now, the thing I teach my families is that, and this is where the biological roller coaster comes in, right? Is that once you're on and strapped in and the ride starts, they don't shut it off. You have to get to the end or you can get out of your seat, right? So you can't slow it down. You can't take a pause. You can't say, I don't want to do this anymore. You're in there for the long haul, right? And so you can't shut it off. You can't turn it off. You just have to surrender to the process and let your body do its job. And I tell my clients that a lot. That's kind of one of my things that I probably repeat maybe a little too much. But let your body do its job. Just surrender to the process. Relax your muscles. Let everything loose. Surrender to the process, because the better you surrender and relax, the less your uterus has to fight for energy and oxygen, and the easier that your labor will be for you. Okay, now, once baby's here, right? Once baby's here, this contraction pattern can be converted or looked at in a breastfeeding pattern kind of way. Now, at the end of labor, typically these contractions will be happening every 2 minutes. Once baby's out, breastfeeding, in the first early days, you might be looking at every hour to hour and a half the baby's nursing, and that is normal, expected. And if your baby's not doing it, you should encourage it, right? But then once your milk comes in and baby's tummy's filling up with a little bit more volume of liquid, then you can start going to 2 hours in between feedings. Not going any longer than 3 hours, but not making baby wait 3 hours either, right? Definitely every 2 hours, at least during the waking time during the day, is really a good standard to try to meet, right? And sometimes baby wants to eat more than that. We should be feeding babies on demand when we're breastfeeding. But every 2 hours helps your baby to get the number of calories in that they need each day. But here's the thing. It looks a little similar to labor when you're breastfeeding. So baby wakes, eats, then we burp, we change, we put the baby back to sleep. But then baby wakes right back up again, eats, and so on and so forth. What? This could be happening every 2 hours. You get, 45 minutes in between, right? Feels crazy. Feels like you're on this crazy roller coaster. And you can't turn it off. You can't slow it down. You can't shut it down, take a pause. You can't say not today, right? When it's the day, it's the day. And when you're feeding your baby, when it's the time, it's the time. And your baby needs nourishment at regular intervals to keep their glucose levels good, to keep their social, emotional connection with you intact and healthy. It's really important to follow your baby's cues, but it also might feel like, oh my gosh, this roller coaster that I can't get off of. It won't last forever. It's just a season. It will only last until baby moves on into the next phase, right? But what I want to also point out is that, if mom is breastfeeding baby, it's really needed for. If she's exhausted, then somebody else could take all of this right? And make sure that baby is changed and burped and comforted back to sleep. And then when baby wakes up, that baby is really good and awake before we go and feed. Not to the point of crying, but just wide alert and ready to eat really well. So this is the biological roller coaster. I hope that it helps you. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment. Reach out to our website. It's MaternityWise.com. You can reach out to us on there. Any page you're on that website has a little comment question box at the bottom, and you can feel free to fill that in, and someone will get in touch with you within 24 hours, usually within minutes or hours. But I hope this helps, and have a great day.